No gunfire, no explosions, no shouted orders, only the sound of boots crunching frozen ground, the whisper of the wind through pine branches, and the pounding of hearts. This is the story of a battle fought in complete silence. By the winter of 1941, the world had become deafened by war. Artillery thundered across continents. Engines of bombers roared in the skies. Cities cracked and crumbled under falling bombs. But far to the north, on the remote snow-covered border between Finland and the Soviet Union, a very different war was taking shape. It was a war that did not roar. It whispered. The ghosts of the snow. The Soviets gave them a name. The ghosts. They were the Finnish long-range patrols. Small units of elite ski troops sent deep behind enemy lines, not to hold ground, not to capture cities, but to disappear into the forest, cut Soviet supply lines, ambush convoys, and then vanish before the enemy could react. For these men, silence wasn't just a tactic. It was survival. A single sound could give them away. And discovery meant certain death. Most of these soldiers weren't born as commandos. They were hunters, lumberjacks, farmers. Men hardened by the wilderness long before the war. They could read the snow as if it were a book, tell where a rabbit had crossed an hour before, know when a tree would groan before it fell. Now, those same skills were turned against the Red Army. Lieutenant Olavi Alakolpi, one of the patrol leaders, described, "It's simply the Russians had more men and more guns. We had only silence and speed." Men of the forest, the long-range patrols, carried little: rifles, ammunition, skis, and sleds with just enough food to last. There were no tents, no fires to warm them, no roaring trucks or engines. They lived in the snow itself, digging shallow pits, wrapping themselves in blankets, and pressing their bodies together to hold in what little warmth they could steal from the night. At 30 below zero, a fire might have meant survival, but it also meant smoke, and smoke meant discovery. So they endured, breath frosting in the dark, stomachs growling from hunger, learning to chew on frozen rye bread so hard it cracked teeth, learning to swallow coughs so deep they felt like choking. It was not glory, it was patience and silence. Cutting the lifelines the Soviet army had pushed deep into Finnish forests. They brought with them endless columns of supply trucks and sleds, fuel, food, and ammunition for an army that thought it was unstoppable. But those lifelines were fragile, and the Finnish patrols learned to cut them. One February night, Alakolpi's men skied 40 kilometers through the frozen dark. The snow squeaked beneath their skis, but only faintly. Every man breathed slow and shallow, afraid even his breath might betray them. From the trees, they watched. A line of Soviet trucks crawled through the night, headlights flickering across the snow. The Finns didn't shout. They didn't charge. There was only a single shot. The driver of the lead truck slumped forward. The vehicle swerved sideways, blocking the road. Panic spread instantly through the convoy. Engines revved. Men shouted. Weapons fired into the night. But the forest absorbed it all. For the Soviets, it was chaos. For the Finns, it was silence. Within 2 minutes, the attack was over. Vehicles burned. Supplies scattered. And the patrol vanished into the woods, leaving only smoking wreckage behind. Survival in the snow. Victory did not mean safety. The wilderness remained a harsher enemy than the Soviets. The men rationed every crumb. Bread frozen solid, slivers of reindeer meat. Melted snow for water, not at night. Hunger gnawed at their stomachs, louder than any artillery shell. But even hunger had to be silenced. One man wrote in his diary, "A cough is worse than a bullet. A cough kills the whole patrol." They learned to press fists to their mouths, to bite their tongues, to choke down even the smallest sound. Sometimes silence meant leaving a comrade behind. If a man was wounded too far from finish lines, rescue was impossible. The patrol could not stop. One soldier, bleeding into the snow, handed his rifle to a friend and whispered his last words. "Don't let them hear you." The patrol skied on. He was never seen again. The Battle of Lake Seitajärvi in March 1942, the patrols undertook their largest mission yet. The Soviets had built a supply base on the frozen Lake Seitajärvi. It was deep in the forest, far from the front. The Soviets believed it safe. 200 Finns set out on skis, dragging sleds of explosives, moving only by night, hiding by day beneath snow-laden branches. For 4 nights they crossed the wilderness, faces covered in frost, lashes frozen stiff. They spoke not a word. Orders were given only with hands and eyes. At last the lake appeared. The Soviet camp stood on the ice, smoke rising from chimneys. Guards stomped their feet in the cold, rifles slung across their shoulders. The Finns wrapped cloth around their boots, checked their knives, readied their submachine guns, and then they moved. The silent raid. Before dawn, the first sentries fell, knives flashing in the half-light. The Finns stormed the storage huts, planting charges. Still no shouts, still no orders. Only the crunch of snow. Then a thunder of fire without warning. Fuel drums exploded. Ammunition crates lit the sky with orange fireballs. The Soviets fired wildly into the forest. Bullets ripped through trees, sparks spraying into the night. But the ghosts were already gone. By the time Soviet reinforcements arrived, all that remained was burning wreckage and silence. The cost of silence, but silence carried a price. For every raid, men were lost. Some bled out in the snow. Others froze before they could be rescued. Their bodies were rarely recovered. Their families received no graves. The cost of silence, but silence carried a price. For every raid, men were lost. Some bled out in the snow. Others froze before they could be rescued. Their bodies were rarely recovered. Their families received no graves. Only silence. One patrolman wrote after the war, "I do not dream of the enemy. I dream of the silence. It presses against me even now, heavier than the snow." By the end of the continuation war in 1944, the long-range patrols had destroyed hundreds of convoys, depots, and communications posts. Their work did not win battles in the traditional sense, but it slowed the Soviet advance, starved their front lines, and kept Finland alive. They proved that war isn't always decided by the loudest guns. Sometimes it is decided by the quietest footsteps. In Finland's forests, there was a war you could barely hear. No parades, no speeches, only silence. And even now, if you stand among those trees in winter, when the wind is still, you might hear the ghosts, not shouting, not crying, just the faint hiss of skis moving through the snow. In war, silence can be as deadly as gunfire. The men who fought in the snow left no songs, no speeches, no glory, only stories whispered through time. If you want to hear more untold battles, forgotten legends, stay with me, because the past is never truly silent. And the stories the world forgot are the ones that echo the loudest.